free consultation.
Be editing this episode also. Holy cats. No audio. Thanks everybody. Let me start again. And when I cut this for the for everything else, we'll trim it. Thank you so much, guys. I'm sorry. I had no idea I had no audio on. Gosh, golly gee. Let me start over from the beginning. Hey everybody, it's Debbie from Delta CX. The rest of it will be cut out when I send it out to iTunes and Spotify. I'm so sorry. I didn't see that the audio wasn't working. Man, oh man. Let's try again. Starting again and scene. So this is episode 41, Should UX and CX Practitioners Code? Today is May 18th, 2020. And I want to remind everybody, please subscribe on YouTube. The channel is Delta CX. I'm trying to get 500 subscribers by the end of May. We got a little bit ways to go, so please do. Thanks to everybody. Thanks for your patience. I know you couldn't hear me before, but we're setting sail now. So I want to mention that this podcast is not going to be like, should developers do UX? It's really specifically to answer the question that I get very often, which is, hey, Debbie, I really love UX and CX. My heart is set on research or testing or interaction design or information architecture or content strategy. But some people have told me I should learn to code. Should I learn to code? And so I have a number of answers to that, since the real answer is it depends. But first, let me tell you a little story about I was once at a conference some years ago, and I had a little table because I was showing off my Acture training. And this guy saunters up to me and he's like, hey, oh, Acture. Yeah, we don't need that. He was a manager of a UX team, evidently, and he goes, I'm making all of my artists learn to code. And I said, well, do your artists want to learn to code? And he said, it doesn't matter. Artists should know how to code. And I said, well, how does your engineering team feel about the code your artists are writing? Are your artists taking work off of the engineering's team's plate, or are the artists creating more work for them because the code maybe doesn't meet their standards? How is that going? And he blinked at me a little bit and he walked away. So that's a little story about not everybody is a coder. As for me personally, I started in computers in 1979 in a class that taught BASIC to kids in second grade. So I was 7. I'm 48 now. Don't bother doing the math. And I wrote BASIC for a little bit, and I got an Apple II eventually, and I wrote some BASIC. I taught myself HTML in 1995, so I was fluent in HTML. Later on, I learned most of CSS, and by the time JavaScript and PHP were starting to sneak into web pages, I said I'd rather hire someone. So I kind of shifted away from the front end development I had been doing because stuff was just getting more complex than I cared to do. So I just want you guys to know that I've been able to work in this industry for many years, have a number of jobs in San Francisco and Silicon Valley without knowing code. So if that's someone private messaging me that my audio is not working, I know I fixed it. So everybody, tell me about you. But so here's my answer to should CX or UX learn to code if you're not already a coder for some other reason. So for that, I'm going to be reading you an excerpt from my book. So if you have the Delta CX book, you have this. It's in a section in part 4 where I'm kind of addressing UX and CX managers and saying, hey, here's a bunch of things managers need to do better. And one thing is, please don't push everybody to be jacks of all trades. First, let me say a quick hi to everybody who told me they couldn't hear me and then they could hear me. Scott, Niku, Honey, good to see Honey, but my boyfriend always thinks I'm talking to him when I say Honey. Andra, Chrids, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. I'm so sorry. Jonathan, so good to see some of the usual friends of the show. So here's what I've got in my book about should people learn to code. And what I'll do is I'll read a little bit and flip back to the chat and see if anybody's got questions or comments. And we'll just kind of flip back and forth. So basically, again, my answer is it depends. So what I do in my book is I run through some of the typical reasons that I've heard or that people have told me as to why they thought that as a UX practitioner, they should learn to code. First, sorry, I'm still struggling with spring allergies. First one, you'll be a better partner to engineering if you know how to code. So remember, I learned HTML in 1995. I learned CSS later. I messed around in a little bit of JavaScript and copy and pasted some PHP, but that didn't help me partner with engineers anymore. Knowing a little bit of HTML and CSS, or hypothetically, if I knew all of HTML, all of CSS, and even all or some of JavaScript, I'm not sure that would help me partner with engineers because I think of engineers as people who are doing front end and back end and DevOps and there's so many elements to engineering, just the way there's so many elements to UX. So what I've actually found has made me a better partner to engineering, especially in the last few years, was I started attending a lot of developer and DevOps conferences because I was a speaker. But even though I was a speaker to talk about UX, I would go to some of the sessions and I would listen to what people were talking about and I would meet people in between sessions. And I started picking up a little bit of information on DevOps. I started learning a little bit about CI/CD pipelines and microservices and continuous delivery. And I felt like that actually made me a better partner to engineering. Even having a basic understanding of their technologies made me a better partner to them. And think about that in the opposite way. Would someone have to understand all the Gestalt principles of perception and all of cognitive psychology and all of the foundations of human-centered design and user-centered design to be a good partner to us? No, but a basic knowledge of what we do and why, and some of the challenges that we face would make people excellent partners. So I suggest if you want to be a better partner to engineering and you thought coding would get you there, I don't think it would, just because you wouldn't necessarily want to tell engineering to go read a UX book and now they're a better partner to UX. That may or may not work. So I like to tell people go sit in on engineering, developer, tech, DevOps sessions. Even if they feel over your head, I've gone to enough of them now that I'm starting to get things. And I ask questions. I meet people, I go, hey, I'm UX. I don't know anything. I even made up a silly joke as like an icebreaker. I'm like, I want a container with a cloud in it on top of a container. And everyone laughs. I go, yeah, I want to understand this little thing. Can you tell me about the difference between continuous delivery and continuous release? And so that's made me a better partner to engineering. Does that mean code makes you a bad partner to engineering? No, but here's a bonus. If you don't enjoy listening to presentations at developer conferences, you might not enjoy coding. So it's a good way to give yourself a little bit of a heads up clue. So again, as I'm going, feel free to ask any questions that you have or leave any comments. I'll be checking in on the chat every so often. LinkedIn, folks, please remember that we are about 2 minutes behind each other because of the lag. YouTube, you're about 20 seconds behind me, so it's a little bit closer to a conversation. LinkedIn is still hearing things I said 2 minutes ago. So just know if you say something, I will eventually see it. So here's another thing that you'll hear a lot, and probably more than anything, which is some jobs want the UX practitioner or UX UI product designer to also be the front end developer. So you should learn to code. Now, if you are learning to code because you think you can't get a job without it, or you have to do it to do your job, remember that you that will be part of your job. You're going to be coding possibly daily as part of your job. It's expected of you. It might even be considered more important than some of your other tasks because code's got to get written and code's got to get out. So make sure you like coding. Love coding would be even better, but make sure you at least like coding because if you go into one of those hybrid combo UX jobs that requires you to also be the front end developer and you don't really enjoy coding, but it's part of your job description, you're going to do a lot of it. And I don't want you to go into a job that's going to make you do a lot of something you don't at least like. So just be careful there. A reminder ever since the mid 90s or so, I haven't been writing any code. I have other people do that, and somehow I've managed to get jobs. So if I can find jobs and other people we know and love on LinkedIn can find jobs, if you want to be a non coder, you can. Here's my next question for the It Depends library universe, which is where will your code end up? Let's see, is LinkedIn still working? I hope LinkedIn is still working. Are we streaming? It says I'm live. All right. Fingers crossed, people. So as I was saying, next is where will this code end up? So are you learning code because you want to build some more realistic prototypes because you don't like Acture or Framer or some of these other tools? Well, that could be great. Writing code for realistic prototyping. I'm for the most realistic prototyping you can make. I'm an Acture fan, but if you're writing code, that's super. Are you writing code that's going to get released to customers? And again, what would the company's engineers think of your code? Because ultimately, the engineers are probably going to have to QA or troubleshoot or check your code. So if you're hoping your coding was taking tasks off engineers' plates, find out from engineers if your code is a blessing or a curse to them, because it could be either way. And also, do engineers feel like you're overstepping your job if you are writing code? Does the engineering team want that code? Do they have a front end developer who they would prefer did the coding for the front end? Does your coding pass your engineering team's standards? When it hits QA and software testing, will it need more fixing than how long it took for you to write it? So we just want to make sure that before you step into somebody else's deep specialty, and remember, we're so busy evangelizing other people to stay out of our specialty, but make sure you're not causing programmers to have more work or more troubleshooting or more stuff just because you wanted to go and learn coding quickly. Let's make sure that we are really adding something to the process and taking work off engineers' plates rather than causing any problems. Yep, working. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for sticking around. So, my next question here is you always hear, should UX designers, UX researchers, UX practitioners learn to code? To code is extremely broad. I mean, there's got to be dozens, if not hundreds, of programming languages being used in the modern day. I'm not talking about Fortran and COBOL, though evidently those are still used. But which language will you learn? HTML, CSS, JavaScript, Python, Go, PHP, Vue, Angular, React, other JavaScript frameworks, Node? You're gonna need a plan. You can't just say, I'm gonna learn to code. What? What language for what purposes? So again, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm saying if you're going to do it, have a plan. What languages do you need to learn, and can you learn them to a level where you are helping an engineering team rather than being, oh no, it's this person again? Because remember how we feel when other non-CX, non-UX people come to us with their sketch of how this should look and work. Sometimes it's a good idea, but very often it hurts. So make sure you're selecting which programming languages you're going to work on. We've got some comments in the YouTube channel, so I'm going to stop and read those from our good friend Stephanie in Luxembourg. Good to see Stephanie. She says, those combo jobs who want UXD to code most of the time, they really need a web designer, someone who can create mock-ups and translate things to HTML or CSS, but web designer isn't trendy anymore. Now we call it front-end developer. That's more trendy. Stephanie says, for me, it's a red flag because most of the time those companies don't want any user research or don't do any user research. And I agree with Stephanie. I think I was just saying something similar where if coding is part of your job, remember, lots of UX work is someone's full-time job. In fact, it's multiple full-time jobs. Research can be a full-time job. Information architecture could be a full-time job. Content strategy, almost a full-time job. Or yes, a full-time job, depending upon where you work. Interaction design, full-time job. Testing, part of research. So already, if someone's asking you to do a much broader kind of T-shaped UX universe, as I normally do, that's already multiple jobs rolled into one. Then if they also expect you to be the visual designer, that's another job. So how many jobs are you doing right now? 4? And then if you're going to be the front-end developer, now that's another job piled on top. Typically, when you have so many jobs piled on like that, you make burnout a lot more likely, but ultimately something loses. Somebody at your company is going to say, because you're going to say, if you're smart, you're going to go to a manager and say, what's my priority? You know, if I'm running out of time, would you like me to work on the visual design? Would you like me to work on research? Would you like me to work on information architecture? Would you like me to be writing code? And very often they will pick the code because the code feels like something we're going to get out the door. Wilson is here. Hi, Wilson. Hello. As a UX designer, what are the best languages you need to learn so you can combine with front end? Wilson from Nairobi. Hello in Nairobi. Is it raining there? It's raining here in Italy. Wilson, I am not a front end developer, so I do not know the best languages to learn. I have heard that you still want some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I think that's normally what's being taught in most boot camps when they teach you coding. I know sometimes if people think they're going to be doing QA or automated testing, sometimes I hear Python. But again, I am not an expert in this. I am not a front end developer. So let's make sure we ask a real front end developer who's working in front end development right now what some of those best languages are. But Wilson, another thing you can do is just look for jobs. Look for open jobs that require you to do the coding, because obviously there are many jobs that don't require you to do the coding and are happy to settle for UX or UX and visual design. But if you find one that combines in the front end code, just read the job description to see what languages they tend to ask for, and that will tell you. So I probably see HTML, CSS, JavaScript the most, and once in a while I'll see other frameworks in there. So check that out. So yeah, hopefully that's making more sense. But I've got more stuff in the book, guys. Another thing I tend to hear is UX designers, researchers, whoever you are, UX practitioners should learn how to code because you need to grow and learn new skills. And I say, there's nothing wrong with growing and learning new skills, but not everybody wants to grow in the direction of a programmer. One direction that I grew in a year or so ago was I started doing a little product management. I wanted to see if I could come up with a good product pipeline and prioritize features and stories for developers. It was at a job I was working at, and that was technically my role. My role was combination UX and product manager. And it was really great to try that out. It also showed me how much I don't know yet about product management, but I thought I did okay for a first time. That might be a direction I'm enjoying going in. I also find I do recommend in my book that if you want to learn new things, why not learn more about marketing? I know that sounds weird, and I know that sounds like, oh, those people, they just send out emails and pop up messages. But marketing is obviously when done right, highly strategic, huge planning, huge thinking into the future, which we often have to do as well. Goals, strategies, initiatives, metrics. They're a great group to partner with. And I am seeing once in a while UX jobs that would like you to know a little bit of marketing and that they want you to understand some of the quantitative side of marketing and market research. Google Analytics, maybe 4C or Hotjar or Full Story, some of those. So I say you can grow and you can learn, but not all of us have to grow in the direction of coding and programming if that doesn't feel like a match to you. Will Kessling is here, says, hello. I think it's important for designers that are designing for web apps to at least understand the box model. Will, now you've got to tell us what the box model is. And don't Google it. So we'll get back to Will in a moment. Another thing I have in my book, I'm looking at my Kindle book on my screen right now, is I heard this said on LinkedIn once, so I copied and pasted it into my book and then I responded to it. And what somebody said when someone said UX practitioners should learn to code, and I said, I don't think they need to learn to code. They can, but they don't need to. And someone said, but people who work across multiple disciplines are more innovative, and I want to be innovative. Well, I feel badly if that's a message that's being put out there. There are many ways to be innovative, and there are many types of people who are more naturally innovative or inventive. And I don't feel like if you work more across multiple disciplines, you become more innovative. Maybe you start having ideas in more areas. Hey, I learned some coding. Now I have this coding idea. But I don't want people to put a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on you now at your job, probably to be innovative, disruptive. And I don't want to see people have more pressure on themselves to be innovative. So much of our products, services, and experiences are failing for average people trying to complete average tasks. Can they even pay their bill? Can they even sign up? Can they even put in their phone number without getting an error message? We're not getting the non-innovative stuff particularly right. So focus on great product, services, and experiences, which I call PSE for short. Focus on PSE that truly solve customers' problems and exceed their expectations. If you're a creative problem solver and you're finding problems and solving problems, you're doing a great job. You don't have to know how to code. You don't have to be a multidisciplined innovator. There are many roads to possible innovation. Think about how many innovations out there were found by mistake. So there's many ways to be an innovator, and many successful people will live their entire lives without innovating something. Remember, innovative's got the word nova in it. It means new, something people have never seen before. Hypothetically, by the book, by the dictionary, an innovation is something so new you've never seen anything like it before. If you're making just the next best thing and it's a bit of a better product or an evolution, that's technically not an innovation, that's an evolution. How many of your friends or colleagues have invented something truly innovative, something nobody's ever done before, no one ever saw before, but was awesome and desirable and needed and beloved? We're not surrounded by innovators, so take the pressure off yourself to innovate. Creating greatness will suffice. And of course, if you can innovate, great, but I don't want to see people put over pressure on themselves about this. Will says it's the default behavior for HTML elements. Will, I didn't know what that was, and I've somehow worked in this industry for 25 years. Stephanie says, many of my front end developer friends don't understand the box model. I explained it to some React development developers, let them learn it first. I don't know the box model, so now we're all going to Google it, box model HTML. CSS box model. The CSS box model refers to how HTML elements, I need some chloroseptic people, are modeled in browser engines and how dimension of those elements are derived from CSS properties. It's a fundamental concept for the composition of web pages. Somehow I didn't know it. I would say it's good to know about grids, but I think that most UX people and especially the visual designers do know about grids and responsive design and a little bit of the tech that goes into that. Remember, I'm not against people knowing tech. Or understanding more about this stuff. I'm just saying you don't have to write code. What if you could learn about the box model? What if you could learn about um, uh, some DevOps stuff? What if you could learn about grids and the some of the tech and front end dev behind responsive design? What if you could just know a little bit about this so that you're conversational in it? Remember, here in Italy, I'm only expected to be conversational in Italian. I'm not expected to be able to give an academic professor speech. I'm expected to be able to answer a help wanted ad and order dinner at a restaurant. So, what if we could just be conversational in some engineering things instead of trying to be fluent in them? Now, again, if your heart's desire is to be more fluent in engineering things and do coding or maybe even join an engineering team, go for it. There's nothing in this podcast that says don't do it. I just want to make sure you know what you're doing and you have a plan and you know why you're doing it and you know how you're going to do it. And if for any reason coding doesn't appeal to you, the way currently coding doesn't appeal to me, just know there will be jobs out there that do not require you to do coding. Yes, lots of UX jobs, lots like to combine lots of things, but remember, those jobs expect you to be darn good at all the things in that job description. They expect you to be darn good at research, at information architecture, at interaction design, at prototyping, at testing, maybe at visual design or creating a design system. Now they're going to expect you to be darn good at front end dev. So I just remind people if you're going to get into something because you think it's going to help you get that job, it's going to be hard to do that job unless you have really good proficiency with it. So again, decide where you want to be conversational in something versus where you want to be more proficient or work your way to expert. And I think that can help people decide, maybe I can just be conversational in HTML, CSS, JavaScript, box model, some of these other things. I can be conversational in DevOps. That's the level I'm at. Don't ask me to actually do any DevOps engineering, but I can be conversational in DevOps and understand some things people are talking about. But I am not going to overstep or be overconfident and say, I should be doing DevOps work because I listened to some conference talks. Will says exactly. Having a working understanding will go a long way. If they want you to code to production and all the UX as well, something's going to fall off the plate. Great, we agree. Thank you, Will. And good to see you, by the way. You're still at the bank. That's excellent. Um, so yeah, I certainly agree. I'm always worried that with these combination jobs, something is going to lose and something's going to win. Plus, sometimes people feel very set up to fail in these jobs, partially because something's going to lose. Like, oh man, they really want me to just do visual design and write front end code and just keep pushing things out. And I'm not doing the research and stuff that I want to do. I can't even test my ideas. So very often in these combined jobs, something loses. You don't get time and budget to do everything. That can contribute contribute to burnout. It can contribute to stress. It can contribute to feeling like you've been set up to fail. Hands up. Who feels like they've ever been set up to fail at a job, especially if they were trying to get you to do too many things in a small amount of time? Stephanie says, yes, Scott Ruber. There are so many cool things. Oh, I got a pop up right in front of what I'm reading. Thank you, pop up Slack. There are so many cool things browsers can do today that we as designers can use to build really nice features to help users. So Scott had a comment and I missed it before, and that's what Stephanie's reacting to. Scott said, progressive web apps are important too. Would be good to be aware of the technical possibilities and implement and limitations with those, if not necessarily how to implement them. Scott, hand raised. Scott's been set up to fail. Me too, more than once. And Scott brings up another great point. What are the up and coming technologies or the technologies that have been around the last few years that are gaining in popularity and importance that we should be conversational in? And I think instead of, for some people, for some of you, instead of devoting yourself to knowing everything about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, whatever, what if you were conversational in a nice arc of general engineering things? So, yeah, you understand a little bit about how code's written. You understand a little bit about progressive web apps, PWAs, look them up. You understand a little bit, you need to understand responsive design, but you need to understand a little bit of the technical side of responsive design. Um, I know a little bit about how apps are developed. So I first worked on an app in 2012. So and I was lucky to work with some developers in QA very closely. So I learned a little bit how apps are developed. And I also think that some of this will just come from good collaboration. Not because you're doing work by committee. You guys know I hate that. But when you are collaborating more, you're going to start to pick this stuff up, and they'll pick stuff up from you. Like, oh, we did a card sort, and that's what it meant, and that's why we did it, and that's really cool. And I'll say, oh, microservices, that's why we do that. That's why we don't do that. That's really cool. Scott says, I wonder how much more prominent VR and AR is going to be given COVID. Hard to know, but it's good to know again. I don't expect you guys to become experts in all this stuff. I don't expect you to be fluent in all of it. And you may not get a job in this stuff, but if you can show up to a job, and even just for a UX job or a UX and visual designer combo job, which I don't like, but if you could show up and be able to say, I've been to some tech dev engineering conferences. I've been to some where I've heard people talk about gestural uh, programming for gestural stuff. I went to Google I/O in 2017. I tried to listen in on stuff Google was talking about, which a lot of that was on their assistant, and how their assistant was going to like make phone calls and pretend to be people, which was a little scary at the time. But I went to Google I/O. I was lucky to go to Google I/O. But I went and I listened to a whole bunch of dev things. And again, sometimes they're over my head, but I sit and I listen and I fish for things that make sense. I write down things I want to know more about, and I go find an engineer at my job on LinkedIn, a friend, and I say, I heard this at Google I/O. I had a friend write me the other day and he goes, yeah, I've been writing everything for this Raspberry Pi and I just started writing in Flutter. And I said, Flutter, what's that? So, now I know this much about Flutter. I'm not going to go into a job interview and go, and I know about Flutter. I don't. But I've heard of it now, and I could pursue knowing a little bit more about it. So I think if we understood frameworks, I think if we understand, and that frameworks are used, I think if we understood some of these more general things about engineers' jobs and approaches, it would be as good for everybody as it would be if engineers understood more about the basics of what UX people do and why they do it, and what some of our challenges are. Let's make sure I'm not missing questions today. Stephanie says, I think AI and machine learning is another technical field it would be nice to be fluent in, especially since those can do so much bad. Yeah, they can do so much bad, she says, ethical issues, etc. Yeah, and again, I also ask myself, how much do I have to know about AI and machine learning technologically or engineeringly, and how much do I need to know about the human experience and the people side of that? And obviously, there's reasons to know a little bit of both. So I think if anybody wanted to be the purple unicorn of something, is see if you can start learning a rainbow of engineering flavors and shapes. This is the Lucky Charms of engineering. Can you learn just a little bit to be conversational in these things? Anna P is here. Good to see you, Anna. When I was transitioning from the dev world to UX, I got a position that was 50-50, code and design. The worst. Anna says, I quickly left because you become a one-person team in both fields. Talk about burnout. I hear you, Anna. That's what I suspect happens in most cases. I can't imagine that a company who has such little understanding of CX and UX that they want one person to do what's often six people's jobs isn't going to lead to burnout, or that you're not going to end up the one-person team doing all of these things supposedly at the expert level. Which just creates some unreasonable expectations. Thanks, Anna P. How are you doing, by the way? Scott R says, Stephanie, ugh, yes, AI and machine learning is so ubiquitous and a lot of it is extremely bad. I would also say a lot of it is not AI or machine learning. And you'll see data scientists and other people joking about this on LinkedIn, like, Debbie, like, I would always tell the story of Amazon. I bought a headlamp on Amazon and I thought the rechargeable batteries were going bad. So I went back to Amazon and I searched for the batteries. And for like weeks after that, Amazon kept trying to push me e-cigarettes. May I clearly say that I don't smoke anything and never have, and I mean anything. So I was like, why what is this machine learning and AI that Amazon thinks I smoke e-cigarettes? And it turned out that the rechargeable battery used in the headlamp that Amazon sold me is also a common rechargeable battery in e-cigarettes. But somehow Amazon's system didn't make the connection between headlamp and its matching battery. They instead thought I was a vapor. So I think a lot of machine learning and AI is a little bit fakey, and and obviously an ethical concern. And if Oz is here, he's going to write hell yeah. But I don't know if he's here. Scott says there's so many areas of technical proficiency that code touches that it's going to be impossible to know it all. But being conversational in them wouldn't hurt. As I said, it's a broad topic. It is. And I feel like I always have more to learn and I'm always trying to learn it. But I think that going to engineering conferences has really helped me work more closely with engineering teams. I don't feel like I need as much of a middle person. I can go directly to the front end developer and speak their language a little bit. I can go directly to a DevOps engineer and I understand some of it. I can go to a back end developer and I know a little bit. Micro, conversational. Couldn't tell you what a line of code looked like, but I have some understanding of databases and organization. And a little of that comes from my information architecture side. But where can we be more conversational and therefore collaborative with our engineering partners? Which again also raises the question, where can we be more conversational and therefore collaborative with marketing? Product is so close to a lot of things UX does. I feel like in some cases, if you're really awesome with CX and UX, you're probably a little bit of a natural with product, though there's still a lot to learn about being a good product manager. But you might have a good natural groove for it. But some of these other things that we know so little about are worth playing with. Like for example, a few years ago, I could not get away from the word funnel. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Everywhere you went, it was like funnel, 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 your website's funnel, marketing funnel, put people in a funnel, funnel everything, funnel over here, and put your funnel in a funnel. And I was like, what the F is with all these funnels? And really, in reality, the funnel was something we'd all been doing all along, but it got somewhere along the line, it got a name. I mean, obviously the idea of bring people into your homepage or a landing page and then hope they fall in love with something you sell, some PSE, product, service, or experience. Okay, now they've moved to that page and hope they want to put it in their cart or sign up for a free trial. Okay, that's the next step of the funnel. And like, so this just, we were doing this anyway and we cared about this anyway, and then it had a name. Scott says, I work in marketing, so I hear the word funnel approximately once every 30 seconds. You can make it a drinking game, Scott, though since I also don't drink, I would say make it like a chloroseptic game and give yourself a nice spray. I'm sorry, I've got my light behind me and I think it's uh, making me look a little bit too angelic today. I have a backlight. How's that looking? I usually, when my hair is wider, it covers it up, but my hair's a little flat today. And my constellation cleared up a little bit. Hey, everybody. Scott says I would have alcohol poisoning on day one. Ouch. Okay, I hear you. So then, what could you drink that would be safe and appropriate? Low calorie, True Lemon, watermelon, agua fresca. I am not sponsored by True Lemon, but I should be because I love them and I that's all I drink. What am I having today? Well, I think I'm having blackberry limeade. Man, I love that stuff. Um, Stephanie says, I would be careful with conversational knowledge. I've had a head who caught keywords and threw them randomly into conversations, and after 2 weeks, we were all tired of the whole surface bullshit. And again, Stephanie's right. There is a difference between going to conferences or reading a book or watching a talk and asking people follow-up questions and really trying to absorb the information, and someone who tries to pick up buzzwords and throw them around. When I looked at some UX portfolios in January, I noticed some of the people coming out of boot camps didn't seem to understand what the word agile meant, and I could tell by the way they used it in a sentence. Like I did agile interaction design, and I was like, what does that mean? And so what made it agile? So I agree with Stephanie. Let's make sure we're not just catching buzzwords and trying to use them and throw them around. That makes us a Dilbert cartoon pretty much immediately. Make sure if you catch a buzzword, go Google it, make sure you learn what it is, or go talk to some of your engineering pals and learn what it is. Like recently, I was Googling the difference between continuous release and continuous delivery, which is DevOps stuff. But I wanted to know more about that, and I wanted to know if how does it relate to Agile, or does it relate to Agile, or does anyone care, or should it relate to Agile? So I was looking that up because I want to know, because I'm always talking to people about Agile and how we might have to modify Agile to make it better. So what else should be fitting into Agile? What should we be thinking about? So I will go and look these things up and try to learn more about them so that I don't say something stupid. Thank you, Stephanie. Brian is here. Hello, Brian. When screens are passed off to devs, being comfortable in code helps ensure the CSS will be properly integrated in order to match transitions or the visual accuracy of the screens. Not required, but a definite advantage in appropriate processes. Brian, I would challenge you on that because what it sounds like you're saying is when UX passes a screen off to a dev or a visual designer, being comfortable in code ensures the CSS is properly integrated. But we would know if the CSS were properly coded or integrated by seeing the builds. We would see the developer builds. We would see if the spacing is correct, if the colors are correct, if the typography is correct. Wouldn't we be able to see that and know that and check for that without knowing a single word of CSS? So, Brian, I'm going to challenge you with a follow-up question. How exactly does knowing CSS help someone there? And what do you think is the downside in your exact situation of not knowing CSS? Because I'm not sure I agree with you, but maybe you can give me a little more information and win me over. Stephanie says, quote, have you tried Ajax? End quote, is still a great private joke with the rest of the team. Yee! Have you tried Ajax? What year was it when I first heard about Ajax, guys? Remember that? Does anybody remember what year that was? That seems like really long ago. 2005. Somebody help me here. Do I have to Google this? Come on. Where's my research team? I don't have a research team. I'm really cheap. I am the research team. When did Ajax? 1999. Oh, okay. So if I heard about it in the early 2000s or whatever, I was in the first wave, but 1999 JavaScript. Yeah, when would I have heard of that? Probably early 2000s. So I was probably a little bit later to the game than the average bear. Only because it was code and I wasn't writing it. By then, I had hired other people to write code, and if they were doing something Ajaxy, I was more on the strategy and UX side. Speaking of strategy and UX side, I'm going to be talking about this tomorrow in office hours. Ask me anything. But I actually found one of my what's this? Embroidered shirts from 1999 with my company name and logo on it and our slogan. And I just want to tell people very quickly what my slogan was because I'm very proud of it. I'm like, oh man, why didn't I keep that? That's a great slogan. And remember, back then I was a website company because I didn't know what UX was yet. But my slogan was websites for both sides of the brain. And the way I explained it to people was sure, you want your website to be attractive and artistic, but it's also got to be easy to use and it's got to be functional and it's got to have the features people want. So, both sides of the brain. Check me out. Check out 1999 version of Deb. Man, I would have been so young. Any other thoughts or questions? Let me go back to my book and see if there's anything else I wanted to mention here. Um, so I'll just read you the closing paragraph from that section of my book, and it says, it's okay to specialize, to be T-shaped, to be M-shaped, or any of these things in CX without coding. Now, in the USA, most in tech are taught to go for jobs that we feel are rewarding, meaningful, and maybe even enjoyable. That means not walking into the trap of, well, I don't want to code, but I guess I have to learn it to get a job. You don't. Sharpen your deep and broad skills in areas that naturally match you. Develop your strengths so they're clear to potential employers and clear to coworkers. If coding's part of that, great. If coding's not part of that, also great. And that's an interesting point that I make that I've forgotten about because I wrote this last year. But yeah, I want to make sure when I show up to a job, Debbie, people go, oh, Debbie, she's really good at these things. Rather than, oh, Debbie, she does a little bit of all these things, but they don't seem to have a sense if I'm good at them or not. I would rather them think of me as good at a smaller group of things. And then I say in the book, I'm not suggesting that you avoid learning code. I'm suggesting it's of a direction you're considering. Make sure you have a plan. Which languages will you learn? How? Why? How do you plan to use them? And how do you hope they might shape your career? We tend to hear people want to learn to code because they think it's the only way to get a job, and it's not the only way to get a job. Plus, I'm hoping that we will shift away from these hybrid jobs and these impossible burnout factories, and we will move back towards specialists. So there's that. Any other comments and questions today? Excuse me. I usually go until we run out of things to say. If we have run out of things to say, I'm happy to wrap it up. But let's see what you guys are thinking. Thanks to Jonathan for subscribing. May I remind everybody, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Oh, it's on this side. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I have the mirror image on. It's Delta CX, as you might have imagined. If you're watching on LinkedIn, you can easily get there by typing deltacx.tv in your browser, and that will redirect you to the YouTube channel. Everything I stream and do is archived there. So if you wish you heard this thing you missed, that other time that you missed it when I did it, it's all there. So there's a playlist for podcasts, which will include this one as of later today. There's a playlist of all the office hours, Ask Me Anything, and there's a couple of other playlists with some other things that I have put up, including some of my conference sessions. When I speak at conferences, sometimes I try to make time to record them in my home studio and put them up so you guys can enjoy them, even if you didn't see me speak at a conference. So please subscribe to YouTube. I'm not monetizing this. You shouldn't be seeing ads, or at least as of when I'm recording this, you shouldn't be seeing ads. So please do subscribe. And Scott says, I'd say if you want to learn code, feel free, but let go of any pressure or anyone who says you must learn to code. That's how I feel too. If it's a direction you want to expand into, go ahead. Go for it. If you love it, dive in deeper. If you don't love it, try again or back off. Up to you. I'm not going to say you have to do it. As for me, I've been kind of poking around more marketing things lately. So that's just something that I've been interested in. I've been looking more at just to now, of course, I've known Google Analytics for what feels like decades. But I'm playing with some other marketing ideas just to be a little bit more fluent in it from the perspective of things like success criteria for not from the engineering perspective, but say marketing and stakeholders in business. Um, they've got goals, they've got strategies, they've got KPIs and OKRs, and they've got things they expect us to make happen. And so, how can we look at the ROI of those things, and how can we count some of those things? And I'm very curious about things like how much can we make a difference in ROI even if a small change happened? So, if we were able to get somebody's conversion rate up 1%, would that be worth it financially to the company to have done whatever project they did to then get a 1% increase in conversion rate? Or does that project only pay for itself with a 2% conversion rate, 10%? I mean, like, I don't know. So I'm trying to start to play with some of these models and see if I can learn a little bit more so that I can have some better conversations with marketing. Again, I'm not going to do marketing's job, and they're in no danger of doing my job, at least when I'm around. But I would love to know a little bit more about these things and calculating them so that I can be able to do a better job of showing, um, hey, if if we were able to increase this, here's what would happen. Or if you spent X hours fewer training people per year, here's what you'd save because the software is easier to learn and use, less training. So, always curious. Stephanie is back and says, if you want some fun and have an iPad, the Playground app is amazing to learn code. It's some puzzles and a cute little character. Thank you, Stephanie. I gave my boyfriend my iPad because I am all Android and I avoid the iPad, but that's a great recommendation and I usually trust Stephanie. So check that out if you want to play around with a little bit of code. Or, of course, you can go back in time like me and learn BASIC. And good luck with that. Sorry, these spring allergies are killing me. If you're watching me on video, I know I must look like some weird drug addict who can't stop touching their face, but I am just not well. And I can't take anything. I just keep shooting chloroseptic on me. Maybe I'll put some tea tree oil on my face. Does anyone think that will work? Hands up. Tea tree oil on my face? Yes? No? Will I regret this? I was recording something in my booth the other day, and my nose was itching so badly I covered it with calamine lotion. You guys know that pink stuff in America that you put on itchy things and poison ivy and rashes and bug bites. And then I got on a video call and I'd forgotten to take it off, and I'd like this big pink nose. That's me. Get to know me. Hey guys, we're almost out of time. So, what I'm going to do while you have any last questions, I'm going to do our usual closing show notes, telling you about some of the podcasts that are coming up. So, let me flip over to my calendar and tell you about what's going on. So, tomorrow is Office Hours Ask Me Anything at 6:15 p.m. Italy time, and I already have some great questions that are have come in. So, send me yours if you'd like, or join in live and ask. Wednesday, the 20th of May, is going to be a super podcast with Leon Dries, who's going to be talking about great relationships with great recruiters, how to figure out who's a good recruiter and create a good relationship with them. Then, fast forward to the week after, Monday, what month begins with S? Monday, May 25th, is going to be a podcast with the always fun Dr. Seth Finkel, who is going to talk about how to recognize and deal with narcissists at work. Very often we've been dealing with narcissists, but sometimes we didn't even recognize it and we didn't know why everything was so crazy. So, narcissists at work. Tuesday, the 26th, office hours as usual. So remember, podcasts are currently 6 p.m. and office hours have been 6:15 p.m. Show note, I am going to, hey, thanks to Wilson for subscribing. Show note, in June, I'm going to change so that everything is always at 6:30 p.m. Italy time. So mark your calendars from June and beyond. My streaming is going to be 6:30 p.m. Italy time. If you're on the East Coast of America, that is 12:30 p.m., possibly your lunch. If you are on the, East Coast. If you're on the West Coast of North America, that is going to be 9:30 a.m. So that's starting in June. For now, I'm still doing these other times. Wednesday, the 27th of May, is going to be 10 traits every UX worker should have. And after I get through my content, we're going to have a sneaky special surprise guest to talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. June, remember, everything's now going to be at 6:30 p.m. June 1st, I'm thinking about doing design sprints are evil. June 2nd, office hours, now 6:30 p.m. And Wednesday the 3rd, we're going to have super special guest Tato Ansuto talking about learning design and instructional design. They are a different profession than UX, but they're kind of our cousins, and let's learn a little bit more about them. Maybe we can be conversational in learning design and instructional design, but of course, not doing their jobs. So, that being said, lots of great podcasts and live streams still headed your way. Again, please do subscribe on YouTube. Those of you joining on LinkedIn, you are absolutely welcome to join on LinkedIn, but I find the stream is not as reliable and you're about 2 minutes behind. YouTube has less of a lag and it's a little bit more of a conversation, which I would prefer. So, with that being said, I guess I'll wrap up. I don't see any other questions coming in right now. So, in that case, I will see everybody hopefully tomorrow for Office Hours Ask Me Anything live at just for the rest of May, 6:15 p.m. Italy time. Ask your questions, send them in. And Stephanie says, thanks for another great podcast. Thanks to you, Stephanie. You really always add great things to it, so I'm always happy to see you here. Scott and Jonathan and Anna, and who else am I forgetting? It was so good to see some of the usual friends of the show here. Will, I don't think you've dropped by my podcast too much, but I'm glad you did. You had a great point. Wilson, of course. And Andra and Honey, you didn't have a question this time. And Niku, you were surprisingly quiet, but it was always good to see our friends of the show. And with that, we'll wrap up, and I hope to catch you guys again tomorrow or very soon.
Thanks for watching. Delta CX is available for consulting and projects related to CX and UX strategy, leadership, training, problem finding, problem solving, and innovation. Learn more at deltacx.com.